Bonjour, bonjour and bienvenue to our series of lectures on Château de la Loire and Ile-de-France. Today is number 8 and we are moving closer to Paris. My name is Patricia Bona. I'm the president of the board of directors of Alliance Française Miami Metro, and I'm delighted to welcome our two special guests, Dr. Mathieu Deldicque, who will open for us Les Portes du Château de Chantilly, and this series curator, Russell Kelley. But first, you know the routine, but just if you don't know it, here are a few Zoom pointers. If you move your cursor to the black bottom of your screen, you will see icons. So image, you can choose to show yourself, or you can choose to hide video if you just want to listen without being seen. Sound, everybody has been muted, but you can ask your questions in the chat. You can type your question. So just type your question during the talk and they will be addressed later at the end of the talk in our Q&A section. So you want to practice? Why don't you practice right now and type in the chat where you're zooming from. This series would not have been possible with our lead partner, Alliance Française de Chicago. Bonjour to Aimée and to all her team. We welcome our friends of OLAF from the US network, the Fédération, the French Heritage, and the participants from WISE in Paris. Bonsoir, Paris. A few words now about Russell Kelley. He sits on the Alliance Française Miami Metro board. He's our vice president. He's the author of many books, but there's a newly published one, The Making of Paris, the story of how Paris evolved from a fishing village into the world's most beautiful city. And there will be a link if you want to purchase this book. He has lived in France for nearly 30 years, and he has visited every chateau that is featured in our series, and many times too. And I must say on a personal note that he has curated this series with une infatigable passion. So take it away, Russell.
Thank you very much, Patricia. It is my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Mathieu Deldicque, who has been the heritage curator of the Musée Condé at the Château de Chantilly since 2015. Last week, you will recall that we visited the Château d'Écouen, which was built by Anne de Montmorency and his wife, Madeleine de Savoie, in a mere 17 years between 1538 and 1555. At the same time, Anne de Montmorency was rebuilding his family's domain at the Château de Chantilly, a mere 10 miles north of the Château d'Écouen. But not only did he build the Grands Châteaux and the Petit Chateau, but that chateau was added to and rebuilt by other great men of France over the next 300 years, as Mathieu Deldicque will explain to us. But first, Mathieu Deldicque invites us to watch a short film to introduce the Château de Chantilly. À vous, Mathieu.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mathieu Deldicque. I'm very pleased to be here tonight with you to speak about the most beautiful and interesting castle in France, which is, of course, Chantilly. I'm very delighted to be with you, with the different Alliance Française in the States, and especially with the friends of the Domaine de Chantilly, our special guests tonight, a great group of supporters who help us a lot to restore, to promote, and to organize exhibitions at Chantilly. Tonight we will have a tour of the different period and different parts of the chateau. Obviously, it will be quite short because it's a very long story, but I guess, and I would like that to bring you the idea to come to Chantilly and to discover this fabulous heritage and fabulous museum. Here is Chantilly, as you have seen at the video. Chantilly is a very old castle from the 11th century. Chantilly is between Paris and Senlis. Senlis is a very important city for the royal family in France during the Middle Ages. And Chantilly was a fortress, medieval fortress, keeping safe the road from Paris to Senlis. Chantilly is also a forest, as you can see on this picture, and Chantilly is very rich with water, as you can see also. Actually, the castle is built on a rock amongst water, and this location, this particular situation was kept from the Middle Ages to the 19th century. Chantilly is also divided in two castles, what you can see on this picture. The first castle, the Petit Chateau, and we will speak about it later, it was built during the Renaissance. And the Grand Château here was before the medieval chateau, demolished during the French Revolution and rebuilt at the end of the 19th century with a style of the Renaissance. So that's why there is a kind of harmony between the two chateaux, the Renaissance chateau and the neo-Renaissance chateau. But we will speak later about this. The first important man in Chantilly is Anne de Montmorency, and you are now very familiar with him because he was the builder of the Château d'Écouen. Anne de Montmorency was a close friend of François Ier, the 16th century French king. He was raised with him, actually, and he becomes a constable, so the chief of the armies, of the royal armies of France, and he was one of the richest men of the kingdom, and he has two main chateaux, Écouen and maybe most importantly, Chantilly. Chantilly was the heart of the lands and of the properties of the Montmorency family, because Chantilly was owned by the father of Anne de Montmorency and by the ancestor of the constable. So here on the right, you have the statue, equestrian statue of Anne de Montmorency, ordered during the 19th century. And on the left, you have from the collection of Chantilly, a drawing made by Clouet, the French portraitist of the court of the young Anne de Montmorency. As you can see, maybe here, Monseigneur le Connétable jeune, the young constable. Anne de Montmorency inherited this castle, so the fortress, the medieval fortress. This is a print made by Androuet du Cerceau, a very famous architect during the French Renaissance. And here you can see the tower, the walls, and the water all around. And de Montmorency wanted to modernize this chateau, this castle, by building this Petit Chateau, so the entrance of the previous chateau. And here there was a bridge previously, and you could enter into the Grand Château through this way. There was a second bridge here. This little chateau, the Petit Chateau, was ordered in 1557, 1558 by de Montmorency, and it was built by his architect Jean Bulan in this new style, this antique style, which is very fashionable in the mid-16th century France. And here you have the entrance of the Petit Chateau. So you recognize this part here. And so there was a bridge, the coat of arms of de Montmorency, and this particular form of an arch of triumph from antiquity. And this was the triumph of the constable, a new general of antiquity in a way. So here it is with the coat of arms of de Montmorency here, and here of his wife, Madeleine de Savoie, very important dame, a lady in 16th century France. And she was the one who was checking the building of the different chateaux, and she was the real landlords or landladies of the properties of de Montmorency, because de Montmorency was at the court, he was at war, and he was not very able to check the buildings. The Montmorency were the landlords of Shanti from the end of the 15th century through and until the beginning of the 17th century, so for more one century. And the last heir of Montmorency, Charlotte Marguerite de Montmorency, was the last heir because her brother was beheaded by Richelieu in 1632. And that's why the chateau was inherited by another big family and an important family in France, which is les Princes de Condé. Les Princes de Condé were the cousins of the kings of France. They were the first Prince du Sang, the Prince of the Blood, which means they were the heirs of the throne if the main branch of the royal family disappeared. And so they were the cousins, very close, they were very powerful, very rich. And the Prince de Condé, Henri II de Condé, husband of the last heir of the Montmorency family, inherited Chantilly, and their son, le Grand Condé, became the first Condé landlord of Chantilly. Alors, the Grand Condé is a very important 17th century figure. He was the greatest warrior of his time, a great conqueror and great general, and he was again also a great rebel. He was rebel against his cousin Louis XIV, Louis XIV, and he led the front, the rebellion against Louis XIV at the beginning of the reign of Louis XIV. He was a big rebel against his cousin. He wanted to have a big power, a great position at the courts, and to become a kind of prime minister for his cousin. And Louis XIV was not very open to that idea. His prime minister was Cardinal Mazarin, so that's why there was this rebellion. after the Fronde, after 1661, the two cousins reconciliated themselves, and the Grand Condé became a great general of Louis XIV, and he was in Chantilly, and he modernized again the chateau, and he created this enfilade, the great apartments of Chantilly, which still exists, with this gallery, a gallery made by Jules Hardouin-Mansart, the architect of Versailles, the architect of the Galerie de Versailles in Versailles. And in this gallery, you have the same system as Versailles. You have some mirrors reflecting the lights of the windows just in front of them. And you have this long gallery with two rooms, two salons, two boudoirs at each extremity. And this gallery is depicted the victory of the Grand Condé, the biggest warrior of his time, I just said. So, for instance, you have here La Bataille de Rocroi, the Rocroi battle, when the Grand Condé saved the realm, the kingdom of France, of Louis XIV, against the Spanish. And here he is on his white horse, like a hero. So this is a kind of memorial of Le Grand Condé. And Le Grand Condé was also very famous to ask André Le Nôtre, the famous gardener of Versailles, to create in Chantilly this very important axis. This axis, very original also, coming from the forest, going through this terrace and ending in the French gardens with some kind of basin, which are called mirrors because they are reflecting the sky, and this big canal, and the canal is bigger than the one of Versailles. So there was still this competition between the Grand Condé and Louis XIV, and this competition between Chantilly and Versailles. And Chantilly was a place where people can feel free, where you can be not religious. So there was a freedom in Chantilly, and Chantilly was an anti-Versailles, against Versailles, because the Grand Condé was a more liberal lord than Louis XIV at Versailles. What is very important also in this perspective, in this axis imagined by André Le Nôtre, is that these axes are not going through the castle. The castle is, in a way, on the sides, in the middle of the ponds, and actually it's because the Grand Condé wanted to keep the antiquity of this castle on this rock among the water, and to say in a way that he was the heir of the Montmorency and the heir of the Lord of the Middle Ages. And so Chantilly is one of the most perfect creation of André Le Nôtre. Obviously, you have Vaux-le-Vicomte, you have Versailles, some very famous gardens by André Le Nôtre. But here, Le Nôtre said to the British ambassador at the end of his life that Chantilly was his favorite castle and favorite gardens, because there was this very original axis, and because in Chantilly you have plenty of water. And this is not the case at Versailles, actually. So here it is, a famous mirrors or reflecting the sky, and which is quite amazing. And they were restored thanks to His Highness the Aga Khan a few years ago. And some part of the gardens were demolished during the French Revolution, but we are conserving some other ones, like the cascade here of the Beauvais Cascades. And here you have a depiction, a botticolor depicting Chantilly during the Grand Condé lifetime. And there were plenty of parties, plenty of banquets, of feasts on Chantilly, and especially on the gardens. And the most famous one is the one in 1671, in April 1671, when Louis XIV came with 2,000 courtiers, welcomed by Le Grand Condé, so his cousin. And Le Grand Condé had a maître d'hôtel, kind of majordome, a man who was dealing with the different, the cook, the different man providing food. And this man was Vatel, François Vatel. François Vatel was coming from Vaux-le-Vicomte. He worked for Fouquet before, and then he worked for Le Grand Condé. And he was very famous, very talented. And he was in a kind of burnout. For 2 weeks, he wasn't sleeping. He was preparing all the banquets, all the dwellings for the guests. And during the second days, it was a Friday, and on Friday you have to serve fish. So Vatel ordered fish from all the harbors of the north of the kingdom, from Boulogne, from Kelley, from Dieppe, and the fish was expected. And the fish was late, actually. And Vatel wasn't sleeping for 2 weeks, remember? So he was in kind of burnout. He was very anxious to not to be allowed to serve fish to the table of the king. And so he feared, he was afraid to be dishonored. And so, seeing that the fish wasn't here, he climbed to his little bedroom and he committed suicide because he wanted to keep his honor and not to be dishonored about this fish. And when he commits suicide by a sword through his body, the fish was coming, and the king was allowed to eat fish. So it's a very famous story. Madame de Sévigné wrote about it, and it was a kind of myth, the myth of the French perfection, the myth of the cook. Vatel was not a cook, actually, but he was dealing with the different cooks, the kitchens. So it was a very famous party, but a very tragic party also at Chantilly. So the Grand Condé, which is here with his son, died in 1686. And another important figure after him was his great-grandson, Louis-Henri, Prince de Condé, depicted here in this portrait on the right. Louis-Henri was a prime minister of Louis XV, Louis XV. He was very rich also, and he was a very great patron of arts. And Louis-Henri, who was disgraced in 1726, was exiled at Chantilly again, like his great-grandfather. And like his great-grandfather, he wanted to modernize Chantilly. And he modernized Chantilly by transforming the Grands Châteaux here, adding a level for the guests, transforming the walls and the towers by creating different new rooms. And he was also transforming the apartments of Le Grand Condé with by ordering the new paneling, the new boiserie, new wood panels in around 1718 and 1720, with a new fashion of rococo, of rocaille. So here is a bedroom of the Prince de Condé. And you have to imagine that the piece of furniture are not original. Actually, all the piece of furniture or the collections of the Prince de Condé were confiscated or sold during the French Revolution at the end of the 18th century. So all the piece of furniture here were bought by the last owner of Chantilly, the Duc d'Aumale, during the 19th century. And he bought very famous piece of furniture, we will see, but they are not the original Prince de Condé piece of furniture. But the decor are the one of the Prince de Condé. So you see the beginning of Rococo style with the dragoons, with the shelves, different ornaments, amazing ones, and quite recently restored. Here you have the great cabinet, so the office of the Prince de Condé, with wonderful, wonderful paneling, Rococo paneling. And you have maybe one of the most famous decor of Chantilly, ordered in 1737 by Louis-Henri, Prince de Condé, which is the monkey room, the Grande Singerie. You have also 4 monkey rooms conserved in France, and 2 are in Chantilly. And here you have the Grande Singerie, the great monkey room. So why monkeys, actually? Why monkeys? Monkeys, the monkeys were the animals very this fashion of Asia, this interest in extreme East. So here, obviously, the monkeys are linked with Asia, with exoticism, and monkeys are also the animals, the closest animal of humans. So monkeys can depict the activities, the clothes, of the hobbies of the Prince de Condé themselves. Some examples here with 2 monkeys with the uniform of the Prince de Condé, the colors of the Prince de Condé. And here you have a depiction of one continent, which is America, actually, with this lady with the feather on her head. And here you have a depiction of Africa with this alchemist, and this alchemist is most likely the Prince de Condé himself, because this alchemist is depicted in his cabinet, a porcelain cabinet, with here a monkey's painting a cabinet. And actually the Prince de Condé was a patron of a new manufacture of porcelain, which is a manufacture of porcelain of Chantilly, of soft-based porcelain. So maybe this depiction of the Prince de Condé himself. So here are some examples, very charming, of maybe the painter himself, Christophe Huet, painter of this monkey room, and here a little monkey with the uniform of the Prince de Condé. And here you have the second Singerie of Chantilly, the Petite Singerie, the little Singerie downstairs on the apartments of the Princess of Condé. And here you have the guenon, so the female monkey with the different activities. And here you have a female monkey eating Chantilly cream. We will speak later about this cream, but this is also a very good testimony of this tradition of cream, of gastronomy in Chantilly. Louis-Henri was also a great builder, a builder of maybe the most important building of Chantilly, actually on a matter of size, which is the greatest stables of Europe, the great stables of Chantilly. They were built between 1719 and 1735, and they are bigger than the chateau itself. It's a palace, a real palace for horses. It's built for actually 240 horses, 120 horses on each wing. And why so many horses? Actually, horses were useful for hunting, and Chantilly were among great forest for hunting. So, and the Prince de Condé was a very good, great lover of hunting. So this is some picture of the great stables with wonderful sculptures, Rococo sculptures by Rideau. And here, this is one of the wing, and they are still used like stables. We have still a great company of écuyères. So you have in Chantilly 30 horses with donkeys, with pony, so little horses. And every day you have shows, spectacle of horses on the stable of Chantilly. So there is a great tradition of horses or Chantilly, and from the 18th century, Chantilly is a capital of horse in France. And that's why during the 19th century, there was an hippodrome, horse races on Chantilly, just in front of the great stables. And there are still races nowadays. And maybe you have heard about the Prix de Diane, which is a very important prize for horse races, and also a prize for elegance, a kind of French ascot, actually, every June each year at Chantilly. So let's talk about Louis Henri. So he was very fond of porcelain. So here you have kind of some pieces of Chantilly porcelain, and very important production of the 18th century. And the son of Louis Henri was Louis Joseph. Louis Joseph, Prince de Condé, he was the owner of Chantilly during the second part of the 18th century. So from 1750 to the Revolution. He was a great warrior also, as you can see here on the portrait on the left. And Louis Joseph was also a great builder. He built the Château d'Enghien for the guests of the Prince de Condé, because the chateau was too small. So to provide some dwellings for the guests, he built this wing, and we have the project to restore this wing, the neoclassical wing, built in 1769. So for the future, we want to restore this wonderful chateau. And he built also maybe one of the most charming place of Chantilly, which is the hameau, the hamlet. So little houses like they were on the countryside of Normandy. So with these wood panels, with a particular roof, and you had originally seven houses like this, and it's a kind of apartments, divided apartments. And here the prince, the princess could entertain themselves. They could eat cream. They could hearing some concerts during the afternoon. So it was la joie de vivre, the French way of life during the 18th century. And so inside the little houses, you have real apartments like that on the right. So with some wonderful pink sofas with wood paneling, very rich, you see. And when you are outside, you couldn't expect to have such a richness inside. So this was a kind of a surprise. And Chantilly was one of the first hameaux or hamlets in France, and Marie Antoinette was inspired by this hameau to create the Hameau de la Reine at Versailles. Chantilly was the first one in the 70s, so in 1775, actually. So, and here, and still nowadays, today, you can eat the Chantilly cream. The Chantilly cream was not invented by Vatel. It was invented during the 18th century. And one of the first real document about the Chantilly cream was in 1782, so very late during the 18th century. And so it's a very particular whipped cream with vanilla, with a kind of particular fatness of the cream, and it's unique, and you have to be in Chantilly to eat the most delicious one. And then the revolution, the French Revolution in 1789. Actually, the Prince de Condé emigrated very quickly after la prise de la Bastille. The day after, they were in Belgium and Germany. So they were very quick, and they left the chateau. And here you have the revolutionary people confiscated the arms, the cannons, and the collection of Chantilly. And actually, they demolished the chateau, the Grand Château, not the Petit Chateau, but this Grand Château was totally demolished during the French Revolution. The last Prince de Condé came back after the revolution. The chateau was partly demolished, and in 1830, the last Prince de Condé died without son, and he bequeathed Chantilly and his wealth to a little boy, an 8-year-old little boy, which is called Henri d'Orléans, Duc d'Aumale, the son of the last king of the French, the King Louis Philippe. So Henri in 1830 was just 8, and he was the wealthiest boy of France. He was the wealthiest boy. He was a clever boy. He was also, when he grew up, a very important warrior, and he conquered with the French army, the French Algeria. In 1843, he fought against Abdelkader and had the famous victory of La Prise de la Smala. Henri d'Orléans was here, and he was married with his cousin, Marie-Caroline Auguste, a Napolitan princess of the Bourbon-Sicile from Naples here. And this happy couple inherited Chantilly. So Chantilly was just that when they were young. So the big chateau was demolished, and you have also the little chateau, so built by Anne de Montmorency and transformed afterwards. And the Petit Chateau, it was inside this Petit Chateau that the Duke and the Duchess of Aumale, Duke and Duchess d'Aumale, built their new apartments for the new couples of Chantilly and the new dynasty. So here you have some depiction of their apartments refurbished and created by the famous decorator Eugène Lamy from 1845 to 1847. And I will show you some depiction of the princely apartment, the private apartments of the Duke and Duchess d'Aumale. And they were totally recently restored. We reopened them last year, and they were the only princely apartments conserved in France from the 1840s, and they are wonderful, as you can see. So here you have the antechamber of the Duchess. Here's the bedroom of the Duchess. So you can see all the richness, all the different influences of this decor with this style, the 18th century style, but here created during the 19th century. Here you have the office of the Duchess d'Aumale with this purple, totally original, but it is the color of the mourning. So after the death of the Duchess, this color was made for the fabric. And then here you have the bedroom of the Duc d'Aumale with some souvenirs, some personal belongings everywhere. And here the office of the Duke. And here the Duke was working amongst all the painting of the Prince de Condé. So his predecessors. So he was a kind of the real heir of Chantilly, but he was here in respect of the Condé family. And then here, the last room, which was originally where you have eating, you were eating. In 1848, le Duc d'Aumale went to exile into England because his father, the king, was destroyed. There was a new republic. The reign of Louis Philippe, his father, was over. So all the family went in exile in England, and the exile lasts for more than 20 years. So Chantilly was bought by some bankers working for the Duc d'Aumale. And Duc d'Aumale was in exile at Twickenham in the suburb of London, and he spent 2 decades collecting. It was his only activity. He was the wealthiest man in France, maybe of Europe, and he spent his time collecting books, collecting drawings, collecting pieces of furniture, and collecting paintings. That's why Chantilly is nowadays the second most important collection of old master in France after the Louvre, thanks to this man, the Duc d'Aumale, the most important collector of Europe during the 19th century. When he came back in 1871, so at the end of the 19th century, he came back at Chantilly. So the chateau was like this, with only the little chateau. And here you had previously the Grand Château, but it was demolished, remember? And then the Duc d'Aumale decided to rebuild the chateau to create a museum for his collection. And that's what you have today, this very important chateau made with this style of the Renaissance style, with some inspiration from the Château de Fontainebleau here, or the Château d'Amboise here, and kind of collection of different references of the Renaissance architecture, French Renaissance architecture, but made to host and welcome the collection. Here, for instance, you are on the right, you are inside the chapel of Chantilly, and on the left, you are inside the chapel of Écouen. So you can see the link between the 16th century architecture and the 19th century architecture of Chantilly. If we continue the visit, you hear some rooms, 19th century room for the collection, with some antiquities, with some other collections, and on the middle of them, you have the library, le cabinet des livres of the Duc d'Aumale, with this collection of books, of manuscripts, which is amazing. It's the most important private library of the world, actually. And nowadays, it's the most important library of France after the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, with more than 30,000 books, more than 1,500 manuscripts, medieval manuscripts, and we will speak later about some of examples, some incunabula, some rare books, so amazing books, and maybe more, above all, the Duc d'Aumale was a bibliophile, so a book lover. Here you have the second library downstairs, which is not open to the public, with other books of the Duc d'Aumale. And afterwards, you have la Galerie des Peintures, la Galerie de Peinture, which hosts a part of the wonderful collection of painting of the Duc d'Aumale. And maybe one of the most interesting particularity of Chantilly, of this collection, is that the hanging is the original one. So it was the Duc d'Aumale would chose to, for instance, place and locate this painting here, and in his will, he forbade people to change the hang. So this is unique in France, and so that's why you have this very particular hang. Here you have in the great gallery of painting, you have the Italian wall, the French wall, and this was the Duc d'Aumale who chose to place every painting like this. And we, and especially we curators, we have to respect this condition. It was in the will of the Duc d'Aumale, and if we don't respect the condition, all the collection, all Chantilly goes back to the Alliance family. So it's a real condition, but it's why Chantilly is so unique in France and maybe in the world. If we continue the visit, you have the Santuario, so the sanctuary of little treasure of Chantilly, with paintings of Raphael, of Fouquet, of Botticelli. You have the Tribuna with lots of masterpieces also. We will see some of them of Ingres, of Saceta, of Frangelico. And here some other examples of all the rooms. And here you have on the foreground, on the background, some rooms we want to restore on the future. In 1897, the Duc d'Aumale died without any heir because he lost 7 children, but before his death, and he wanted to bequeath Chantilly, all the lands and the surroundings, all the collection to the Institut de France. The Institut de France is a French institution who rules the French Academy, the Science Academy, the Fine Arts Academy, so all the academies of France. And this institution is located in Quai Conti in Paris, in this fabulous architecture. And here you have where the academies are gathering a few times a year. So it was a way to give Chantilly to his country, to France, and to bequeath to a very solid and stable institution. And still nowadays, the Institut de France is the owner of Chantilly, and the Institute is conserving some masterpieces of the Duc d'Aumale, for instance, this Frangelico on the left, or the Saceta of Siena on the right, the famous Simonetta Vespucci by Piero di Cosimo, the most beautiful woman of Florence at the end of the Quattrocento, and she became a kind of goddess of beauty, of love. And this is a very famous painting of her and portrait of her. Chantilly is the most important collection of Raphael in France after the Louvre. We have 3 paintings by Raphael. For instance, the 3 Graces by the young Raphael, but also the Orleans Madonna by Raphael in Florence, or the Madonna de Lorette, the Loreto Madonna by Raphael in Rome at the end of his lifetime. Afterwards, you have the Carracci from the Palazzo Farnese in Rome. Also some important French paintings, for instance, Enguerrand Carton, 15th century painter from Provence, but also the most important collection of the world of the French portraits of the Renaissance. We have all the drawings of the Catherine de' Medici collection, more than 366 French portraits of the Renaissance, but also more than 100 French Renaissance portraits. For instance, here you have François Ier, Francis I, and here you have Elisabeth d'Autriche, the wife of the King Charles IX. If we continue in the French collection, French painting collection, you have Le Massacre des Innocents, the Massacre of the Innocents by Nicolas Poussin, very powerful painting by Nicolas Poussin, painted in 1730s. Also Watteau, but also Jean-François de Troyes. This is maybe quite funny. This is a painting ordered by Louis XV in Versailles for his apartment in Versailles, and here this is the first depiction of Champagne, of the Champagne in the history of painting. You have the little cork here flying here, if you can see. So this is kind of famous. This is a déjeuner d'huile, it's a lunch of oyster. You have oyster and champagne. This is a wonderful example of lunch. For the 19th century French collection, you have Ingres, the self-portrait of Ingres, which is quite famous, but also the portrait of Madame Duvossé, but also some Orientalist paintings with here you have Delacroix, you have also Decamps, and the collection of books is famous, and maybe the most famous works of art of Chantilly.
Hello, bonjour. Russell, are you there?
I am here, and I hope that Mathieu Deldicque will be able to resume his fascinating presentation. Will he interrupt if he can? I know that he was about to talk about the extraordinary collection in the library, and the last image that he put on the screen was of the book called Les Très Riches Heures du Duc de Berry. I've forgotten exactly when it was. I think it's 14th century. It's an illuminated manuscript. So it was actually written and drawn by hand in the 14th century, and it's got many famous photos, many famous images that we recognize.
I am very sorry. I don't
Okay.
know what happened because my connection is good. So
we left you with the Les Très Belles Heures du Duc.
Yes.
Okay.
So maybe you can I share my screen? So I'm not allowed to share my screen again.
We'll let you share.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Sorry. So it's nearly the end. Don't worry.
So
the collection of drawings is amazing. Here you have some examples of Raphael, of Leonardo da Vinci. This is called the nude Mona Lisa. It was made after the Mona Lisa, but it's another model with the pose of the Mona Lisa. Here, a famous drawing by Michelangelo, but also Clouet, Watteau, some photographs, quite famous also. And we have new prints and drawing galleries for 4 years now. And thanks to the Friends of the Domaine de Chantilly, we can organize 3 exhibitions per year of drawings, prints, and photographs. And some sculptures. This is a monument of the earth of the Prince de Condé, made at the middle of the 17th century. great collection of miniature piece of furniture. This is a Swedish cabinet given by the King of Sweden to Louis Joseph, Prince de Condé at the end of the 18th century, but also maybe the most famous piece of furniture is here. This is the commode ordered by Louis XVI for his bedroom in Versailles. It was made by Jean-Henri Riesner, and it is in Chantilly. And some advertising, we have a wonderful exhibition of Meissen and Chantilly porcelain, and it postponed until the end of August. So I hope that you all will be able to come to Chantilly this summer to see it. And this summer also you will have this exhibition of School of Fontainebleau, so French Renaissance style drawings in partnership with Fontainebleau. So another important exhibition, and a special award for the Friends of the Domaine de Chantilly. You can see on the website, so this is the FODC, and you can all be member and to support Chantilly, to support the collections, the exhibitions, the restoration. We have so many projects to do with you, and here wonderful images of some events organized by the Friends of the Domaine de Chantilly and some parties. But don't worry, Vatel is not among us anymore. So the fish is every day at Chantilly in the 17th century. So thank you very much. And I hope to welcome you at Chantilly as members of the Friends of the Domaine de Chantilly to live wonderful events like this one.
Bravo. Thank you so much, Mathieu. That was what one of our members of the public described as an exquisite presentation. You covered a phenomenal amount of territory very well, and inspired a lot of us to visit Chantilly. We had one person say that you were frozen when you were just about to talk to about the Très Riche du Duc de Berry. If you could just repeat what you...
Yes, so maybe I will stop sharing my... So the Très Riche du Duc de Berry was, this is a manuscript ordered by the Duc de Berry. He was a son of a king and the brother of the king, so a very important man at the beginning of the 15th century. And it was painted by his three brothers, the Limbourg brother, and is the most important and the most famous manuscript of the world because there is this cycle of illumination made by the Limbourg brothers depicting all the castles of the Duc de Berry, and it was quite famous because Walt Disney took inspiration from it for the chateau of how do you call it, La Belle au Bois Dormant? I don't know.
Sleeping Beauty.
Yes, exactly, Sleeping Beauty. So that's why it's very famous, and it's like painting on manuscripts. It's a wonderful, wonderful objects or masterpiece.
How did it end up at Chantilly?
It was bought by the Duc d'Aumale, like everything at Chantilly. It was actually in Italy, in Genova, and the Duc d'Aumale bought it in 1856.
Phenomenal. Were all of the images that you showed us, all the paintings, the etchings, the furniture, all of those were purchased by the Duc d'Aumale?
Exactly. He was the main collector of France and maybe of Europe during the 19th century. He's the wealthiest man, and he spent his life collecting because he was not allowed to have a political or military career because he was the son of the previous king. So when you are very rich and you are idle, what you do, you collect.
Well, and it takes a little culture too to know
exactly
what to collect. But And so I think you said it, but the collection itself, which is called the Musée Condé,
Yes.
is in the Grands Châteaux.
Yes.
Is the library in the Grands Châteaux as well?
Yes, yes. Le Grand Château and Petit Chateau, it's nowadays one building. There's no bridge anymore between them. It's just one unique building. And yes, it's inside the chateau.
Okay. And the Petit Chateau has the apartments
Yes.
of the Duc d'Aumale.
Yes, and the great apartments of the 18th century.
And the great apartments of the 18th century, including the two Saint-Géry.
Exactly.
And the question was asked, why two?
One for the male apartment and was one for the female apartment.
Oh, I see. But of course. And where are the other two Saint-Géry in France?
Alors, one in the Château de Champs-sur-Marne, not very far from Paris, Champs-sur-Marne, and the other one in at the Hôtel de Rohan, so it's in the Marais, so inside Paris.
First of all, you showed an amazing image which completely transformed my understanding of the Château de Chantilly, which was the one of the Grand Axe designed by Le Nôtre. And when you approach Chantilly, you do not have that. It's difficult to appreciate. You have to be above.
Exactly.
And that completely transformed what looked like a rather asymmetrical structure into something that was extremely symmetrical.
Yeah, you know, André Le Nôtre was an architect of gardens, but above all an architect. So he drew the axis, and the axis is conserved, which is a marvel.
Yeah. You mentioned that the Grand Chateau was built on rock,
Yes.
And the Petit Chateau, was it built on a separate rock or the same rock?
It's like a little pilotis, I don't know to.
Okay.
So
foundations were put in the.
Exactly. So it's not a rock, it's on the water, like in Venice.
I see. Okay, so on pilings.
Yes, exactly.
And what is the water around it? Is it a river?
Yes, there was previously a river, La Nonette, which is from, and the river was transformed into a Grand Canal. So that's why there's so much water at Chantilly.
Okay, all right, that explains a lot. Now, you did briefly mention the Aga Khan in connection with the stables. Could you just describe what his association was with the Château de Chantilly?
The Aga Khan?
Yes.
Actually, the Aga Khan was the main sponsor and a wonderful sponsor for Chantilly between 2005 and until last year. For 15 years, he was actually the rulers of Chantilly. He created a foundation to save Chantilly, to restore Chantilly, to promote Chantilly, and he left last year for personal reasons. And thanks to him, Chantilly, there is a Chantilly revival. Lots of the buildings, the stables, the gardens were restored, and it's we are very, very grateful to him for having helped us so much.
Yes. And so now that he is no longer supporting the chateau, you are under the ownership, as you mentioned, of the Institut de France, which is quite unusual. I think they own one other chateau, but
the Institut de France owned the Musée Jacques Marandré also in Paris. And yeah, we are very unique in the French environment. And this year it's totally it's not a good year for Chantilly, because due to the pandemic we are not allowed to be open and to welcome the public, and we don't have the help of the French government either. So that's why maybe you have read on newspapers that we are
seeking support
for supporters, for help, and that's why the Friends of the Domaine de Chantilly are so important for us.
Absolutely, and certainly encourage anybody in the audience to join the Friends of Chantilly, the Domaine de Chantilly. One other question that so two questions. One about does the Écurie have a writing school? In Vienna, as you know, you go and you see the Lipizzaner horses prancing around and performing for the public. Is there any such public performance at Chantilly?
Yes. Every day you can see performance, you can see riding shows inside the stables. And we have nearly 10 girls. They are artists and they are performing with their own horses every day. So this is a great tradition of Chantilly. And it's like Vienna, it's like Saumur, so all the capitals of horses.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Does Versailles, as you know, has in the summertime great fête?
Yes.
And they don't have as much water as you do, but it looks like they've got a lot because they filled up that huge canal and they have gondolas and fireworks. Do you have similar fête in the summertime?
We are creating some of them. We have the flowers shows twice a year. So the most important fête of flowers in continental Europe, so excluding United Kingdom. And we organizing movies on the gardens, and we are creating other events. So stay tuned.
Okay, great. The amazing library there, is it accessible by scholars to do research?
Yes. So please go to our website, domainedechantilly.com, and you can, if you are a scholar, you can have an appointment to see some manuscripts, some archives, some drawings. We have a reading room open 4 days per week for scholars.
Brilliant. Has a reopening date been set yet?
No, unfortunately, we are waiting for that, and it's we are desperate to by waiting.
Mathieu, we have been impressed by the quality of your presentation and the presentations of other curators of Chateau. And many of us would like to know a little bit about how you became a heritage curator. So could you explain to us what the curriculum is to go from the bac, high school, to a curator?
And in France, there is this system, very governmental system. So after high school, you can go to university, you can go to a grande école, so École des Chartes like me, or École du Louvre, or other schools. And then you have to succeed in a competitive exam, because curators in France are civil servants, so paid by the government. So if you succeed in this competitive exam, you go to a school of curators, and then you are sent to the national museums.
Have you been to other national museums before?
Before Chantilly, I have been to the Ministry of Culture itself, and I was a curator of French Chateaux.
Oh, well, that sounds like good training.
Exactly, before being a curator of a real chateau.
And these schools that you go to become a heritage curator, are they all in Paris?
Most of them are in Paris, but you can go to any university in every region of France, and you have to follow history of art, actually. career courses, and then you can pass this exam, competitive exam, to become a curator. So it's not, we are not all Parisians.
I see. Okay. And I should mention that Mathieu Deldicque also has a PhD in art history from the University of Amiens, which we heard about last week, because at Écouen and, as you mentioned as well, Chantilly were both originally built to protect the road between Paris and Écouen, or Senlis, and Amiens
also, yeah,
on the way. Thank you so much, Mathieu, for your excellent presentation. And I'm sure that you will have inspired many of us to visit Chantilly at the earliest possible opportunity. I know I will go back with a completely different perspective. And the one thing that you didn't get to talk to in your very comprehensive talk is the spectacular garden, which is a wonderful place to wander around as well. And that's where you can eat the fish you did talk about. They have some nice restaurants there. Wonderful place to go for a summer day. And as always, we will be sending out a recording of today's lecture in a day or two. I'd like to thank the co-hosts of the series, the Alliance Française Miami Metro and the Alliance Française de Chicago, and our partners, the Federation of Alliance Française USA, the French Heritage Society, and Weiss. And I'd like to thank our attendees today, and especially to the American Friends of the Domaine de Chantilly. Thank you for attending today's lecture. And I invite you all to please tune in a week from today at the same time for a tour of the Château de Vaux-le-Vicomte, which Mathieu mentioned, is where not only was Vatel the maître d'hôtel at Vaux, but I'm not sure if it was before or after, but Lenôtre designed the garden. Was that before or after?
Before.
Mathieu?
Sorry, I was some noisy.
Did Lenôtre design Chantilly's garden before or after Vaux?
After in the 1660s.
Okay, so Vaux was the first garden or major garden that Lenôtre designed, along with his collaborators, Louis Levaux, the architect, and the decorator Charles Lebrun. And we will see this, the results of the works of this famous trio, both at Vaux and then later at Versailles, of course. And the speaker next week will be the 5th generation owner of Vaux-le-Vicomte, Alexandre Vauguet, and his lecture will be in English too. So I would invite you all to please unmute yourselves and give our distinguished guest,
Thank you.
Bravo. Bravo. Bravo.